Hello. Hello, good evening, everyone. Good afternoon and good morning, depending where you are. Welcome to Connect Africa. We are here once again bringing you topical issues in the continent. Today, our topic for tonight is the visit of the senior Eritrean military delegation to Ethiopia. Before we go to that, to discuss that, we have our Pan-Africanist brother, Dr. Biniam Misgun, who is joining us from South Africa. Welcome, Dr. Biniam, once again.
Thank you for having me, Marlet, and thanks for the viewers for always supporting this program.
Thank you. So yeah, we are 7 minutes late. It's an everyday work, but yeah, we are getting there. And every Tuesday and Thursday, we are here doing a live streaming with Kwame, and Dr. Binam also joins us sometimes. We try to do it. The aim is to bring him on a weekly basis. So he's our analyst on issues related to Eritrea or Ethiopia relation and also Horn of Africa. Actually, any topical issue is in the continent. So just to remind you once again, if you are not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. And we do it like no other does it here. We analyze things from the Pan-African perspective. We do it unapologetically because that's the goal. I mean, to look at everything that's happening in the continent, to look at it from the African perspective. Now, going to our topic today. The senior Eritrean military delegation led by the National Intelligence and Security was in Ethiopia for a few days visit. I think it was this week, and they left. But their visit, in my view, I think some call it the unprecedented visit, but I really doubt that this is unprecedented. I mean, it looks, the timing of it looks like there is big preparation behind it. Why would I say that? Number one, this has shocked actually in three levels: internally, continentally, and then globally. Internally, because this delegation, the senior military delegation of Eritrea, came right after, the palace in Arat Kilo has received the TPLF, which has been delisted from terrorist group recently, and it's also the 5th year anniversary since Dr. Abiy Ahmed came to power, where this times where TPLF segregated itself, I would say, to Mekelle. And then it was that time exactly also the prime minister, called for a peace or kind of extended the olive branch to Eritrea, and the Eritrean delegation came here. So like about, if I'm not mistaken, in 2018, 5 years ago. So it was that line of difference already. And then why I say continentally is because also Egypt, or the Al-Sisi's administration, who kind of disappointed. They always try to manipulate countries to backstab or to attack Ethiopia because of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, and they couldn't do to do that through Eritrea, because Eritrea has been an alliance of Ethiopia or with Ethiopia. And then globally, why it shocked also, I would say, the United States, because it's just 3 weeks ago or maybe 2 weeks ago, the two countries wrote that a very strong statement that complemented each other, basically asking the US to revoke, which the US was accusing both countries for the atrocities, as they say, committed in the war in northern Ethiopia now. And then we have this senior military delegation. what do we say about this? Is this like to again is conveying another message to show that the two countries are committed to work together, or is it otherwise? Is there a concern between the two? Now, I will leave it for you, Brother Biniam.
Thank you, Marlet. I think it's very important to bring it into a context. Yeah, when Eritrea and Ethiopia signed that peace agreement back in 2018, yeah, it was a very broad one. Yeah, it outlines the various elements that they needed to work on. Yeah, the economic integration, the military and security relationship that they need to establish. The accord was very much looking into the future, how those two countries could work together. Yeah, and then later on, it was expanded to include Somalia into the fold as well. And it wasn't going to stay there as well. It was also going to include other countries in the region, including Djibouti to the east, and Sudan and South Sudan to the west as well. Yeah, that was a very important step that those two leaders, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and President Isaias Afwerki, had decided at the time. It was a very important step. Yeah, and then that was interrupted by the war. And the war in the northern Ethiopia, the war itself was instigated precisely to sabotage this process. Yeah, and if you recall, the Americans and many European states were very much against this three countries signing a tripartite agreement. Yeah, it was they did not like it at all because they could see that they're moving away from the outer sphere of influence, and this they did not like. So the war was instigated precisely to create a wedge between Ethiopia and Eritrea. And for a little while, for good 3 years, yeah, we squandered so much opportunity to build on that agreement and bring those countries together, work out a formula, work out an institutionalized arrangement to strengthen that relationship and that goodwill. Now that they thought was over. So they proclaimed that the tripartite agreement is finished. Ethiopia and Eritrea are in this agreement. And of course, there was a powerful states that are trying to break them apart. Yeah, each time Americans visit Abiy Ahmed's administration, they will tell them, you need to stay away from Eritrea. You need to push away Eritrea. In fact, forcing it to treat Eritrea as enemy, as a troublemaker in the region, a spoiler, and all that. Yeah, but Eritrea has proved itself that it's none of that. It wants a stable region, a stable neighborhood, and all that. Now, all the newspapers for the last few months had been talking about Eritrea is not happy with the peace agreement that was signed in Pretoria. Eritrea wants to sabotage it. It's going to be the spoiler of this peace agreement. All that. And this particular trip actually dashed all that. That was very important. It dashed it. Internally and externally. In fact, the TPLF leaders and some of their propagandists were saying, now we're going to be working with Abiy Ahmed administration and, look northwards and, wage a war against Eritrea or with, engage in war to kick Eritrea, our so-called Tigray's sovereign land, which is, it's the Badem and some parts of Europe that was already demarcated virtually, and that border dispute is already settled. But anyway, that's what they were trying to promote, yeah. And this trip, it dashed all that, and it was a very much coordinated trip. The number of army generals, security establishment that participated in this. It tells you a lot. And then the places that they visited also, it shows you that they are trying to build a trust, to demonstrate that they're working together, they're coordinating their work. And of course, Eritreans had been talking about it in a number of ways. Even President Isaias Afwerki in his last interview did it, in fact, indicated that there was so many lessons drawn by working together in this particular war and coordinating our efforts in the military field and doing similar stuff. And the future is a possibility, all that was indicated. And now we are likely to see ever more strengthening that relationship. So it's a very important trip, and it did send, I think, the right message. And Americans were eager to break that alliance, but it's just sending a message to them that those two countries are not going to budge, and they will continue to work together. And then this relationship is a strategic one, and not the one that many are trying to make it out to be an alliance against the TPLF. Now, the TPLF only featured as part of a problem making tool for the region, to disrupt the peace. Other than that, the alliance is a very much strategic one. Remember, Eritrea trained some troops to Somali government and Somali state. Ethiopia is supporting Somali state. Yeah, stabilizing Somalia. Kenya is coming on board on that. And I think those are important steps that we need to see, that regional security is as important. Internal security is going to be defined by the regional security. Regional security has a direct relationship to internal security. And I think Eritrea's outlook has been exactly that. And Ethiopia's seem to be in agreement with that. I think the current administration is in agreement with that. And I think it's going to be going from strength to strength going forward. That's what I foresee in the coming years. And back to you, Marlete.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Biniam. That was really nicely laid out. And also, yeah, we keep on forgetting, and people sometimes, we also hear even from media that we don't know what the agreement is between Ethiopia and Eritrea, as if it's just that the prime minister went and signed but, there are things that are well noted and scripted there.
Yeah.
So it's good that you reminded us that. So this is in line, what we see now is in line with that. Now, ever since the peace agreement has been made between TPLF and the Ethiopian government, meaning the federal government led by the African Union, there are some steps that have been made. Those leaders of TPLF have been in Addis, met the government, also including the prime minister, have visited places. But the most important step was recently when the parliament has delisted TPLF from the terrorist group. Now, what is between TPLF and Eritrea? Nothing has been changed, right? How a concern is that for Eritrea, and also because it's good to clear that there are again some media outlines that come with the news because the government now, in terms of rehabilitating, I would say, the regional forces in the country that really helped the federal government or the National Defense Force during this war. If the Amhara regional force wasn't there, and then the Eritrea from the other side, things were, it was a different story. We will not talk about this now. But how a concern is that for Eritrea?
I think the very point you mentioned that should be left for another engagement is actually a very important part of this equation, this engagement. This particular trip was also demonstrating that Eritrea is only aligned with the Amhara forces against TPLF, and therefore has huge influence on the Amhara forces. That was being said time and again, and Eritrea training Amhara forces to destabilize Ethiopia. Remember, those are some of the newspaper articles were mentioning that TPLF cadres were pushing this, and some Oromo activists also raised that. But this clearly demonstrates that this has nothing to do with that. Eritrea, in principle, do not appreciate this ethnicization of politics in the region and in Ethiopia in particular. It's not a tenable arrangement. Yeah, you cannot build the state. You cannot make a stable state by ethnicizing politics, and that's a very dangerous one. So Eritrea is an agreement that all those ethnic-based forces must be incorporated into the national army. Ethiopia need to move away from this ethnicized politics and regionalism. Yeah. So that's very important, and this particular trip was also in line with that kind of, casting away this relationship is a strategic one, and needs to be on the base of this mutual understanding that we're going to build a stable nations and stable neighborhood as what this trip was made to demonstrate. And of course, you should understand, those are military officers, senior military officers of Eritrea security establishment. They don't travel that much. Yeah. And you need to they have never been, some of them never been to any country as an official visit. This is a significant one in many respects. Not that they are not they did not have the opportunity, but they don't want that kind of limelight. When they came out in this number, is to demonstrate that we are working together, we are coordinating our efforts, whether it is in cultural, social, political, military, we are working together. In this particular case, the security and military element is being coordinated at the highest level, and we are looking for stable Ethiopia. That's what they want to demonstrate. And now back to what TPLF it has been doing, and the fact that it's been delisted from the terrorist list from the Ethiopian Parliament decree, as part of the Ethiopian Parliament vote. Now, Eritrea knew this was going to happen because it was an agreement, in Pretoria Agreement. Yeah, it was going to happen. It was all laid out in Pretoria Agreement. It was very much expected. Yeah, it the only matter that Eritrea was concerned was that, is it going to be implemented in the way it was stated, and how long is it going to take, and who's going to sabotage this process? Yeah. And obviously, the Americans had tried to sabotage this process, and every opportunity they had, and the TPLF, some of the hardliners within TPLF as well. You need to understand there are several blocks being formed within the TPLF itself. So there are some who are aggressively arguing that we need to mend fences and mend relationship with Eritrea, and as much as we try to do the same with Amhara and Afar. But there are the hardliners who are saying that no, we have to go into another cycle of war, and that is not going to be accepted by anybody. Now, many were trying to point out Eritrea military leaders went to Ethiopia to ask the Ethiopian federal government, to give it a security guarantee. There's nothing called guarantee. They work together. They ensure that this happens by coordinating their effort. They reduced TPLF to where it is now, just a force that's only confined to a few cities within Tigray itself, by working together. Yeah. But what the American side tried to do through this peace process is achieve several things. And the most prominent one is find a way to create a crack between Amhara and the federal government, find a way to create a tension and mistrust between the Ethiopian government and the Eritrean government. Yeah, this they try to work so hard, and in fact this is what has my opinion, this is what they try to achieve, at least in the case of creating a mistrust between the Amhara elites, among some of the Amhara. Of course they're not homogeneous and coherent in their arguments and claims. So some of the Amhara elites are now mistrusting the federal government. Yeah, they think that is going to give them away. You know, that some of the regions is going to be handed over to the new transitional administration or government of Tigray. And there's nothing called, you know, giving away land. Yeah. Disputed lands, they are there, and the federal government is not going to make a decision that this belongs to you, this belongs to, doesn't belong to you. Yeah, it cannot do that kind of judgment. Yeah, it needs to be needs to follow a due process in order to make a decision to finalize this. Yeah, but in a way, what they're trying to do is use that to politicize it and eventually create mistrust and create chaos, tension, and eventually that would allow them to impose themselves and intervene and become part, supposedly part of the solution, as they claim to be part of the solution in this Pretoria Agreement. Yeah. And it allows them to have leverage and therefore influence politics and regional dynamics to their perceived political and geostrategic advantage. And that's what they had been trying to do. And this visit is showing the Americans, no, you're not going to gain anything out of this. Yeah, that boat has sailed long time ago. Here we are in this region wanting to decide our future by working together. Yeah, and it's not just between Ethiopia and Eritrea, but also including Somalia, Kenya, Sudan, and South Sudan. Remember that the Eritrean delegation was also in Juba, yeah, presenting a message from the President Isaias Afwerki. And that tells you that there are those elements which needed to be brought into this equation and this engagement that we have seen thus far. And I give it to you, Mahalet.
Thank you. Brother Biniam. Really, very important analysis as you brought to this answer. To this question. Some of our viewers are commenting. Africa reimagined military alliance needs to be expanded across the region and continents. Now, this brings to our discussion. Actually, there was this tripartite agreement that was there, and which the West has gone crazy, and that was why they were sponsoring TPLF to really make a regime change in Ethiopia. Now we see some, as you said, you have touched them. There are changes. I mean, the Eritrean government have been in Juba. Prime Minister Abiy also have been in Juba, trying to bring the two leaders, to make a peace. And then Sudan now is completely on a different position that we know a year ago. It's not the same Sudan. So there is this kind of aligning itself with Ethiopia and Eritrea, and the views they have. Their relation with the West and their relation also with Egypt, nothing is the same. So it seems they are working together. And Kenya, who were not in the picture in that tripartite agreement, is now coming. So many were asking, this tripartite agreement will not work, the Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia, because it doesn't add others. countries in the region. Do you think now that tripartite agreement is broadening somehow and including others? And what now that somehow the war is over, uh, kind of, uh,
Mm,
what will what change we will see, because we didn't see so much in practice that tripartite agreement because of the war Ethiopia had for the past 2 years.
mm,
What changes we will see, and how important it is, this military alliance, with a greater horn in the region.
mm, yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, you're right, and it's a very important one. Initially, there was mistrust because it was a tripartite alliance between Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia, right? And then the argument was it is to the exclusion of IGAD, and it's going to, exclude Kenya, to be at the expense of, other East African communities and all that. But you have to understand the most unstable countries in that region, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia, conflict, tension. That was the biggest. Yeah, addressing this would be a strength for Horn of Africa. Addressing the issues between Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia, if you address that, and then much of the problems in the region would be addressed. Yeah, those conflicts had been going on for more than 60 years. You have to understand that. Yeah, once you create this strip along the Red Sea and Indian Ocean part of the coast, then you have created a stable coastal area as well as inland. That will tie in Sudan, bring in Sudan into that. South Sudan will be drawn into that. Djibouti obviously would be part of it, and then eventually Kenya would be included in that. And this would have been a strength for IGAD. Yeah, IGAD's major challenge had been those countries. Remember, and IGAD became crippled because Ethiopia and Eritrea could not come into in terms with each other. Yeah, it was crippled literally. Yeah, in many respects. So if you bring those into the fold, then you would have a stronger region. And then, of course, the vision wasn't just to create those three countries, and some were talking about the Kushite alliance, yeah, Cushitic alliance. But that's not what this was about. This was about to start with this and then broaden the circle. Yeah. You can't have an alliance of the three excluding Djibouti. Djibouti would have to eventually come to the fold. Sudan would have to come into a fold, and South Sudan and Kenya. And now that's a growing recognition that a stable Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia would have so much to contribute to stabilizing South Sudan and Sudan, yeah, and of course a stable Kenya as well, yeah. So those countries would be a force to be reckoned with as a region. Yeah. And now they are already talking about how to bring that into IGAD itself, and which is a very important step that was taken by Kenyan President Ruto by inviting Eritrea must come to IGAD. Let's let's work together. Using those divisions, the West had played a negative role in the region for far too long now. We need to tighten the nooses, close those loopholes that they have always exploited. So the creating division and tension had been what they had exploited. They always come as peace envoys, but what
Yeah.
we know is from experience, all they have offered us was tension and a conflict. Stalking conflict, eventually coming to manage it. You create a crisis, you come then manage it, and that's exactly how they have extracted political and geopolitical benefits as they I don't know what kind of benefit that they would earn from that. But this, what we have reaped from this is basically wasted years. So many of our productive energies being squandered, and our youth, we are in pain. That we've lost so many young people as a consequence of this conflict. Nobody wanted. but somehow instigated against us. And back to you, Mahalete.
Yeah, indeed. Speaking of IGAD, yeah, important point you raised, yeah, is Ruto inviting, of course, Ruto have been, I talked about this, I don't know, it was with you or with, I think with Kwame maybe, Ruto was in Asmara just
Mm,
before the US Africa summit. And I thought that was really, really symbolic,
mm,
to check on your neighbors, to be that you are your brother's keeper, because Eritrea and some other countries were not invited for a number of reasons that US stated, but it was yeah, just because he just before he left to the US Africa summit, and that was really very symbolic. I
mm,
find it now. In return, President Isaias has been in Nairobi, and one of the important things, actually, without really paying so much attention, that was just swept under the rug, was the invitation. That strong statement by Ruto saying
mm,
that Eritrea must come back
mm,
to
mm,
IGAD, and we should have that strong IGAD in the region. Number
mm,
one, how practical is that now for Eritrea? Is there an interest? Is there an appetite for it from the Eritrean government? Number two, also, I just want to highlight this for our viewers. Maybe you can see that right after that, after making that speech, it was maybe a few days or I don't know, a week, we have witnessed, still continues now in Nairobi, a mob coming out against the Ruto government. I don't know so much the internal politics, but me as an Ethiopian and observing what's happening in Africa tells me something every time when you try to create that alliance with countries that is
mm,
the US do not want you, as if they have authority with who
yeah,
you are going to befriend.
yeah,
Something happens in the country, right? So
yeah, yeah.
I just wanted to highlight that. Yeah, so
Mm.
over to you.
Yeah, you're right, Malit, and of course, Eritrea. I think you have to know that Eritrea was one of the founders of IGAD in its current form as it was reconstituted. In fact, it rallied countries in the early 90s. You know that we have this opportunity. Let's work together and build this and turn it into a proper regional organization that would facilitate security in this region and development and economic integration. So then it's how this regional economic community was established in the early 90s. Yeah, from what it was about early warning system against locust and drought. You know, that's what IGAD was in its former constitution, and then transforming it into a proper regional economic community. And Eritrea only left IGAD in a protest against Ethiopia's or TPLF Ethiopia's interference in Somalia and its negative role in Somalia. Somalia was about to be stabilized. Yeah. I don't know how many of you remember in the 2000s, it was about to come together, and local initiatives here and there were contributing to stabilizing Somalia, and each clan members were coming together to this initiatives to rebuild and reconstitute the Somalia state as it should. And Ethiopia, at the behest of the US, in fact, to do US's bidding,
Mhm.
it was called the Islamic Court, and therefore it is supposedly going to be radical and anti-American, and therefore we had to destroy it. That's how Ethiopia went into Somalia, and Eritrea protested against that, and IGAD members didn't say much about it because they were still mummed and bullied by the US, and then Eritrea left in protest. Yeah, and should Eritrea have was it the right decision that was taken by Eritrea? I'm not sure. Yeah, It would have been much better. You sit in the inside and try to influence things, but now Eritrea still needs to build strong regional formation, and I think IGAD is the right platform, and I'm sure many in Eritrean political establishment has already realized that. But they need to see that there is an agreement to rehabilitate, revitalize IGAD itself. Otherwise, it's going to be repeating the same mistake. That's the kind of sentiment that I get from the speeches that they make about it. But most importantly, the political will is there to revitalize ICAD, to come back and play its positive role, its positive contribution to the region. And then you cannot do that by sidelining IGAD or by being outside of IGAD. You could play a lot more by being inside of it. And the other element is that IGAD had been used and abused and misused by Western powers. Remember, the biggest funders. Yeah, so they could continue to use IGAD to do their dirty business, and therefore, if Eritrea is inside, then it cannot be isolated. Now, the Americans probably want to isolate Eritrea by, bringing IGAD into their fold. Remember when Anthony Blinken was in Addis, he made the IGAD's chairperson. Yeah, it makes sense. So what did they discuss?
Sorry, I was muted. I do remember very
Yeah,
well. I do
what did
remember.
they discuss? Remember, so it's very important to see those dynamics. So Eritrea wants to play a constructive role in the region and can only do that by empowering and strengthening those regional bodies. Yeah, and of course, it's not just they, but it's also the need to play its constructive role within the African Union as well. Party to it, participate. Even in the Human Rights Council, Eritrea had been abused and maligned by Human Rights Council because Human Rights Council had been effectively a tool for U.S. imperialism. And of course, it's groupies, all the Germans and all the rest all contribute to this drama. But Eritrea decided that it wanted to play a constructive role by being inside, you know. So that's why it sought to be a member of the Human Rights Council. So it needs to be framed within this aspiration that Eritrea has. And if we want to extend the alliances from just Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia, you need to bring in Kenya, South Sudan, and eventually also Uganda. I don't see any reason why all the East African community could come into this fold as well. In other words, another marriage between IGAD and East African community. Already the members of East African community are members of IGAD as well. There are overlapping membership. Yeah. So if they marry together, expand their infrastructure network, the transportation, telecommunication, it would be a huge advantage for the rest of the continent. So I think that's the kind of vision that I see from Eritrean leaders, and I'm sure that vision is there also from Ethiopian leaders. And that's why they work. Kenya, Ethiopia, and Eritrea are working to stabilize Somalia. Now there is recognition. Now Somalia had been exploited for other economic benefits. Each one of those member states used to get. Ugandan army would benefit tremendously by just being
Yeah.
there. So it doesn't want the conflict to go away
Yeah.
because it's reaping hefty amount of money that the Europeans and Americans were throwing into it. Yeah. So Somalia's problem was perpetuated with those kinds of interests. Now, if regional states come together and have a joint vision, a vision that is converging, a stable Somalia is in the best interest of all of us. That, I think, is the best way to move forward. And I see those steps being taken, Kenya, Ethiopia, Eritrea coming together, some form of understanding on how to work together in relation to Somalia and in relation to South Sudan and Sudan. And Sudan is going through this turbulent period
Yeah.
precisely because external interference had been so heavy.
Mhm.
You know, they divide them like you won't believe. Now the civilian administration doesn't want tension with Ethiopia. Some member of the military do not want tension with Ethiopia, but then there will be some who will be bullied and bribed or whatever case maybe to somehow do some horrible
Mhm.
decision. Yeah, and that is counter their interest, counter the Sudanese interest, and counter the regional interest. So we need to come together, have a common vision, and then of course those leaders need to be member of party to that kind of common vision that we want to establish. And if few states are forming that and eventually broadening the circle, and I think we have a winning formula here in the region going forward. I think there is a
Mhm.
promise future for all peoples in this part of the continent.
Thank you, Brother Biniam. Really nice. Yeah, we have covered from the visit of the senior military delegation from Eritrea. That really is the one you said. These are not the people who want to travel, not because they don't have the opportunity, because they don't want one. It could be the character of their work, but they just don't want. And you can see that it's a rare face. That's a rare face you see there. And what's the head of national security? I mean, how many times that I have watched that picture for myself, and it's really interesting. You can see that there is really they are coming
Mm,
stronger out of
mm,
all these challenges, the two countries, and it
yeah,
shows that
yeah,
they are committed in spite of all what we hear from
yeah,
here and there to divide the two countries, because exactly that's what the
yeah,
US wants, to
yeah,
make enemy,
yeah,
for those countries
yeah,
to be enemies, and then to create division, as if Amhara is at. I mean, so many stories are going out,
mm,
and we have read and we have heard. So this
mm,
brings me to the final question. What will be your message? Because at the end of the day, this platform, what it does is to give it a Pan-African perspective, and people
mm,
to look at things, whatever happens, wherever happens in the continent, about Africa. We should look at it from the African perspective. Only that way we can benefit.
mm,
So what is really your message? Because a lot is, I mean, it's going crazy.
mm,
Media mainly, it could be the social media,
yeah.
mainly. Yeah.
Uh, Yeah, I think we need to understand.
All these
We need,
negative things.
yeah, we need to be very reasonable to ourselves. We have problems, of course. Yeah, the multiple problems that each of our countries are facing in the region. Yeah, but those problems are not going to be a permanent part of our future. We will address them bit by bit, but we can only address them bit by working together, which our leaders seems to have recognized, and that's very important. Yeah, and then we need to separate issues. Yeah, we can't compound them all into one to create just one picture. It's a complex one. For example, let me give you just a brief example. Many people are complaining that TPLF has not been disarmed completely, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if you recall when I spoke about the peace agreement, this disarmament and demobilization. It's a very messy process. Yeah, it's a complex process, and putting time frame on it is just going to be you can put to see how far you're progressing, but it's always not going to happen according to your planning. understand. A lot of things that needs to happen. You have to have the resource, you have to have the political will, you need to convince everybody. It needs to go down all the way. There might be some who would dispute this and disagree with the within the rank and files are not going to accept it. Some mutiny would happen. All that, you have a range of complex issues that would happen. But ultimately, it needs to happen. Yeah, whether it's slow, whether it's now or slowly, bit by bit. Okay, that's the one thing. The second element is there is huge pressure on regional states, on Ethiopia and Eritrea, yeah, uh, by Western powers. Huge, yeah. Uh, we need to recognize that this is very difficult to maneuver, but they are doing it one bit at a time. In the old days, it would have been easy. We're going to give you this much money, go to war with Eritrea, and it would have happened in the old days. But this is a different world altogether. This is a different region. Yeah. So it cannot happen in the way Western powers want it to be. So I don't know if you remember Borrell and Joseph Borrell of that European foreign commissioner or something. I can't remember.
Ministers, they call it.
Yeah, yeah. So and Anthony Blinken, they were talking about their relationship with Ethiopia is going to be determined how this peace process is going to unfold. Yeah, that's what he said. What does that mean, really? Who are you? You know, you think you care more about peace in Ethiopia more than the parties involved. What does that mean, really? So we need to strip away that narrative that we are killing each other and they are trying to help us. In fact, it's to the contrary. They are instigating those conflicts,
Yeah.
and eventually they try to manage it in this way. So when things are not happening the way they expected it to be, and they get frustrated, they become ever more reckless and bully. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening in our region, and I think there is some understanding among our leaders. This cannot happen anymore. We're not going to allow this, and I think I can sense that from what they are talking about. Even recently, I don't know if it is accurate, but some information about Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed had already conversed with the Tigray and the Tigray transitional government, yeah, that they have to start working with Eritrea to move toward this constructive peace, yeah, and that
Actually,
is.
I would see that, but gone. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is a very important message, that we need to work with each other, and it's to the benefit of all of us. Yeah, if we have a peaceful region, development can take place far more quickly and more sustainably. Yeah, if you have conflict war regularly, yeah, you cannot build. Even what you have built will be destroyed, as we have seen. And trying to reconstruct that, it will take another resource, another even one war making effort. It drains you in a significant way. And I see some part of appeasement from Ethiopian government, but obviously it's the arm being twisted that far. You sometimes have to give in to accommodate certain element of their demand in order to facilitate, governing your complex state. Ethiopia is a country of 120 million people, and therefore the demands and the tensions and the pressures, the different issues that and Ethiopia has is something to bring into this equation and consideration. And I know some Eritreans had unfairly judged, the moves taken by Ethiopian government, but they cannot compare what Eritrea does with what Ethiopia does. And what Eritrean leaders do not want to do is dictate policies to Ethiopian government. They want to work together, but also recognize this is a sovereign decision of Ethiopian leaders. Yeah, and but we can work together. What we can do is try to coordinate our policies, yeah, and look at the strategic interests. In other words, the long term, see beyond those contemporary challenges and events. So it is not a relationship between those current leaders, but a relationship of people that would have to last for generations. And that's what we have to keep in mind at all times. Yeah. And the same would have to apply our engagement with Somalis. Same would have to apply with our engagement with Kenyans, South Sudanese. Yeah. That's why in his recent visit of a Sudanese delegation to Eritrea, I remember this Isasa Forke was saying that don't let others dictate your, yeah, look look for inside solutions. Yeah, you have the capacity. And of course the statements that we saw that came out by foreign ministry of Eritrea in opposition to Blinken's office is exactly that. We have the capacity to look for internal mechanisms to address our challenges. Yeah, you don't have to do that on our behalf. We are adult enough, and the Ethiopian government is also more or less the same thing. We have already established internal mechanisms, and it should be respected. This is a sovereign decisions of Ethiopian government, and this is about building relationship, mending fences, not retribution. That's why it's called the transitional justice, yeah, restorative justice, yeah. It was, but what the Americans wanted to do is, disrupt that, allow the hate and the tension and the discord to continue, yeah, and use that as a leverage, propagandize it, politicize it, bring it into media and all that. And Ethiopia is refusing to allow that. Eritrea is refusing to allow that, and I think many other countries also are coming on board in relation to that. So I think we are seeing small steps, but very steady steps. Yeah, and eventually it's going to take us to the next level where we would see a much more stronger unity and solidarity in the region. Already we see much of it. And of course, everybody's expecting the economic integration and both countries moving into a stronger economic state, economic prosperity for both countries, and not only for both countries, Ethiopia and Eritrea, but also Sudan and South Sudan and Somalia, Kenya, Uganda. I think we need to broaden the vision, and that would allow us to create a prosperous, regional states. And I think we are on the right path for the way I see it, despite all the challenges, despite the deck stacked against them, and it's powerful powers trying to disrupt it. And I think that has to be underlined. Yeah, and they're carefully maneuvering it, and I think I have to impress upon you that we have to appreciate this. They're working against the tide. They're working against those ever more powerful and desperate. When powerful individuals and states become desperate, they become reckless. They become ever more aggressive. You have to look at ways in which Americans are bullying not only Africans but also Europeans. We need to understand that can only come from a reckless and desperate person or country, and so they are working against this. And in the face of their limited resource, they are trying to somehow bring in the results that we want, and bit by bit. Thank you, Mahalet, and I think I've said enough on this
Yeah,
point.
no, I think it was really nice. Definitely, uh, they are indeed desperate. We see that. I mean, even from 2023, how many officials have been sent? They are really, really desperate. As our analyst here, Kwame, like to to call it a
Mm,
nagging partner.
yeah,
But they're after something. And also what you said needs to be really emphasized. Despite the challenges these
yeah,
countries have been
yeah,
working, really, it might seem a slow steps, but bit by bit, it's a strong commitment that we see from
yeah,
countries like
mm,
Ethiopia, who heavily also depended for its
mm,
funding and different things from the Western country, but to be that resistant, and to show that it's a sovereign country, it takes
mm,
things in its own hands and
mm,
handles it.
yeah,
Eh, it needs to be appreciated, and the way this conflict and the chaos they tried to
mm,
create in the region was
yeah,
contained only in one part, and it remained to be there. Of course, it affected other northern parts of the country, but
mm,
still it was not at least exported to other region as they want to destabilize the region. I don't think any African country will survive this, really.
yeah.
uh,
It's very, very hard. Yeah.
they were bombarded and
Mm,
bullied by
mm,
from the US
mm, mm.
administration.
Yeah.
And
Just
that
one,
is, yeah.
yeah, one last point. One last point. Yeah. I keep I wanted to say it, but I keep on forgetting about it. Whenever we speak about it, your Eritrea relationship, they had established, yeah, committees to look at agreement, trade policies, and all the rest. They had been drafting, working towards that, but then it had to be put on hold precisely because this has happened.
Mhm.
You know, they were looking forward already, looking into the next 10, 20 years already. They had so many visions for the region, not just only the two countries, but also the broader region as well. But that had to be on the back burner precisely because we are confronted with this particular problem. Yeah. And they didn't want this problem to go away. That they wanted it to last as long as possible. In the same way, they are using the Ukrainians, to drain, yeah, Russia. And they wanted this war to continue so that they would drain us, yeah, until they get what they want out of this. And obviously, it's impossible to give them what they want out of it, out of this. Regime change in Eritrea, creating new countries, just getting rid of China, it's not going to happen. It's impossible to achieve. But they're so desperate, they are trying to imagine this kind of region and impose this kind of conflict on us for far too long. And they're not even happy that this has happened. This has come to at least this far. Yeah. We don't know what's going to happen. For sure, the people in Tigray don't have the appetite for any kind of conflict.
Exactly.
That we know. They're tired of TPLF. And I think that there's fatigue everywhere, not only in Tigray, but everywhere. Yeah. That the war weary region already is being formed and they want to move forward. And I think that is a good stepping stone for our leaders to build on and say, okay, enough is enough. Yeah, we need to start mending fences, look forward into creating a stable region, an integrated region. Thank you, Malet. Once again, I really appreciate the effort you put into this. It is a very important platform, and I really, really like to support this every opportunity I get. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Biniam. You are already supporting it by being here. You are committing your time, and every time you are on board, and you are a family now. You are not even supporting, you are part of this. I mean, we have been doing this for so long. But thank you very much. Really, thank you very much. I can't, as a blessing. And yeah. That's it for us for this evening regarding the senior military delegation of Eritreans to Ethiopia, and which we will see also it's going to be reciprocated by group of military also from Ethiopia to Asmara. And yeah, if anything, platform like us, people like us, what we should do is really to support and ask ourselves, what did we do to really to strengthen this alliance? What can we do in our profession?
Yeah.
That's the minimum thing, at least one thing that we can do. So
Okay.
I ask you, all of you, to ask that same question. What did you do really to support the governments in spite of everything they are passing? They are getting tested
Mm,
through fire,
mm,
really. So, and they are doing what they can. But what did we do? What did we do?
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and there are
Absolutely.
always ways to do our own our things on this, digital era that we are in. Thank you very much, Brother Biniam. We will meet again soon, again to discuss topics, what's going on in the region. And until then, have a good evening and good night, everyone. I would like to give a shout out here. Abraham, Adiam, Regmo Music, these are really kind of permanent viewers here. Franklin, nice format, thank you. Africa Reimagined, our brother Kwame also here, and encouraging. Yeah, Joel Nigetic. I think that's, I believe, South Sudanese name. But yeah, really, thank you. Thank you, everyone. And have a good evening. Thank you, Brother Binia. Bye bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.